Okay, whoops.
You're not supposed to say whoops. We're live.
Live from Austin, Texas, this is the Plutopia News Network. I'm Scoop Sweeney, and that's John Lebkowski over there. We're just waiting for our esteemed guest, Emily Gertz, who will be joining us from New York shortly. Hi, John. How's things in South Austin?
Well, they're very south at the moment. It was raining here.
Ooh, we got a little of that out here in the eastern county.
Yeah, I mean, the climate changed for a minute there.
Okay, you have to pardon me there. I'm twiddling things. Yeah, I'm the master of twiddling with the knobs and the controls here. So, what's our plan for tonight, John?
We could talk about cake.
Cake. Okay, they said
We haven't, we've had a lot of interviews and discussions over time, but I don't think we've talked about cake yet.
Well, I'm always up for a little cake there. In fact, I've got some cheesecake in the fridge as we speak that was calling my name. I could hear it right now.
You know, it was really pretty revolutionary when we were kids. Our moms didn't have to bake cakes from scratch anymore. They were able to go buy a box that had a bunch of stuff in it that would make a cake. Just add an egg and maybe some milk.
I remember that innovation. My mom liked it. In fact, she liked all those boxed foods there. That was one of the mixed blessings of the 50s is they gave us a lot of food in a box or food in a wrapper or food in a aluminum reheatable dinner tray.
Well, think about how we take the whole idea of being able to get food that is not potentially dangerous, being able to open a can and fairly reasonably assume that what's in there is going to be okay. Or, in this case, it would be a box full of some mixture of flour and various other things that allow you to combine it to make a cake. And then you could buy, at the time that I was a kid, you also bought the mix for the icing in a box.
Icing in a box.
Yeah, but now you can buy a can that has the icing already made.
Yeah, you can get the spray-on icing, which is kind of a ultra sugar version of spraying the mouthful of whipped cream. Something I'm sure none of us have ever done. At least we have
spray-on icing.
Oh, yeah, you can get a can of icing. It's kind of like the Cheese Whiz that they sell, only it's instead of Cheese Whiz, it's icing. And usually it's the decorative stuff that you can write the name, happy birthday, whoever.
Well, and there are all these people who have been really worried that Bill Gates is going to put a microchip into their bodies through the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. They're crazy. He's using cake. He's in the cake mix.
Yep, that's Bill for you. I figured he would, bring back Clippy or something at Microsoft and use that to insert something into us other than anger and angst whenever that thing used to pop up.
What would the world be like if Clippy had been a cake instead of a paper clip?
Probably just as irritating.
Yeah, this is true. Well, I read the news today. Oh boy.
Oh boy. How many holes in Albert Hall?
I don't know. I'm not sure that you could count them all at this
Well,
point.
if Boris Johnson was there, it'd be at least one. And I won't continue along that line of disgust anyway. Sorry. I can't help myself sometimes. I really could, but I just generally don't care. So what else we have in news? A lot of backpedaling from our dear Fred Biden. on the masks. It's everyone has a different view of the mask. And I see Emily coming in. So there we
There she
go.
is.
I can stop embarrassing myself. And
Well,
welcome.
Emily unmutes. We're rolling.
Good evening.
There
you
you
are.
are.
Ladies.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I'm arriving just in the nick of time like this.
Well, we were actually having a pretty good conversation about cake.
Oh, cake. One of my favorite
We were
topics.
talking about the revolutionary advent of the cake mix back in the, I guess, 40s or 50s, whenever that came around.
Yeah.
But I should make an introduction. This is our friend Emily Gertz, who is a freelance reporter and editor and a Plutopian par excellence.
Thank you very much.
And we are very happy that you're here.
Glad to be here. So, what's going on?
Well, you tell us, what's your beat now? You're not just covering climate now, right? You're covering other things.
Yeah, I'm pretty much I am an environmental reporter by trade, you might want to say, but as it happens, for the past several months, I've been working as a contributing editor at The Conversation US, where The Conversation is a site where research scholars and scientists report to the general public on their research, and people like me with a journalism background do help edit the stories for general readers. I think our motto is scholarly expertise with journalistic flair.
Wow.
Sounds like
And yeah, and as it happens, the environment desk is full up on editors, so I've been covering a lot of other topics there: religion, ethics, health science, some politics stories. So but I am trying to keep up with environmental news, but it's kind of hard not to these days. At least want to keep a little bit of a bead on what's going on with the big climate legislation in Washington, D.C., but it's just part of the general picture in DC of how things are really taking a long time while I guess the Senate and the White House decide how they want to grapple with Republican obstruction. So
So do you find that people are kind of wanting to hear from experts when they could actually hear from perfectly good bloggers who will let them know what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, The Conversation is actually, and again, like, I don't speak officially for them. I'm a contributing editor, but it's the site is established in multiple countries and multiple languages, and there does seem to be a real hunger to hear, fact-based information.
We're going to plug The Conversation.
There we go. Thank you very much for plugging The Conversation.
Oh,
yeah, no, I mean, it's people seem to really respond to the fact that our scholars are coming at the topics from a position of expertise. It's not that people always agree with the scholars' conclusions, particularly with some of the stuff I've been editing lately in like the religion area, but they're reporting, they're talking about things based on their independent research and publishing papers and things like that. So yeah, the readership's good. And, as you kind of saw there from the front page, we do try to, we have sort of a track where, we're asking scholars to, talk about their research in relation to current events, in addition to maybe having sort of more, what we call evergreens in the news biz, stories that are kind of interesting, whether or not there's something happening currently in the news.
Here's a good one. I mean, should fully immunized people wear masks indoors? That's very
I actually
right now.
I want to read that one myself.
Well, with all that credible content, it sounds like just the kind of place that Tucker Carlson's going to be showing up to on a regular basis, right?
It'd be great if Tucker Carlson became one of our regular readers. I think that could only help the known universe.
And hell freezes over.
Well, he would never admit it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Tucker Carlson is apparently has the most popular cable news show, or the most watched anyway. It could be that people are watching it and throwing tomatoes at their TV set, but there's certainly a lot of people who have that show on.
Yeah.
But it's actually in the like a couple of million people. So compared to the population of the U.S., it's not that many. But compared to the base for overall news shows, it's a little bit more than MSNBC gets for somebody like Rachel Maddow.
Yeah. You know, I mean, those raw numbers are certainly like a metric of something, right? And I'm trying to do something about this reflection in my glasses. Hold on.
Oh, that's okay. It's
That
kind of
doesn't
a
help. Let me get some natural light in here. See if that does the trick. No, that doesn't. Sorry, being very
That was
experimental
interesting.
tonight. Yeah, but I mean, you know, obviously, what happens when those people watch Fox News? You know, what happens next, right? I mean, there's tons of anecdotal stories, people talking about trying to discuss things with their parents or, you know, their brother-in-law, and, you know, no, I saw it on Fox News. But they certainly do have a real knack for turning the news cycle their way, you know, across the mainstream media. If it happens on Fox News and it's edgy enough, it seems like the Times and the Post and MSNBC and CNN and, you know, will cover it. That's called earned media in the biz. And, you know, there's nothing more valuable than earned media, as opposed to the media like advertising that you pay for to promote your message. I mean, so I don't respect their message by and large because it's afactual so often, but they are savvy people over there at Fox. They know how to get their message across.
well, it's kind of interesting. They're kind of a propaganda outfit in a way, but they do have straight news reporting, not necessarily during prime time.
Yeah.
And they have some good news reporting. They have like Chris Wallace is a good reporter.
I guess some people like the criticism is that he's kind of their beard, you know. I don't think Chris Wallace feels like he is, you know, but some of the critique is like a couple legitimate journalists who have ethics don't make up for, like, you know, 6 straight hours of you know, the evening pundit lineup. And also, actually, you know, in the wake of the election, Fox let go of some very well-respected political journalists who had been on their election desk for years, and very decisively took a turn for the more red meat, you know, opinion-based broadcasting. Unfortunately, like I don't think there's anyone who would criticize the Fox election desk. Like, no matter where you're situated in the journalism universe, they very, you know, talented, skilled, ethical group of people who for years and years did a great job monitoring and calling national elections. It's you know, I hope those folks are finding gainful employment elsewhere.
Yeah, because those people were the ones that gave Karl Rove a seizure, I think, when when they called and it went against his predictions.
Yes, the famous moment of Megyn Kelly getting up from behind the desk and walking down the hall, you know, in her shortish outfit, her shortish dress and her highish heels, and her very long legs, and Karl Rove looking very, very unhappy. Yeah, that's a classic. That's a classic moment. And this year, of course, Fox was out ahead of AP in Associated Press in calling Arizona for Trump, and that was a pretty hot water moment, I think, for the folks behind the scenes there. I think it's been pretty well reported that Trump, then President Trump, had an absolute meltdown and wanted them to recant, and they didn't.
But called it for Trump or Biden?
Oh, I'm sorry, called it for Biden. Yes,
Yeah.
Called it for Biden against Trump, ahead of the Associated Press, which is sort of the outlet that many news outlets turn to for the final word. Like when the AP calls it, most other outlets will also call an election or an election result. But Fox was always typically following their own polling, their own analysis as the votes came in.
Yeah, I was surprised by that so much, though, that I spilled wine all over myself because I just happened to tune through because I was playing channel roulette to see who was saying what. I heard that, and I lost it. It's like, it's the end of the world. I'm sure Mr. Trump is not having a good evening.
Well, what was interesting, I thought, was, that they were able to call it so authoritatively, and they were right. I mean, so quickly, because really a lot of the states really took the pattern that that some reporters and election observers had been trying and get the public to understand was going to happen, that with the number of absentee ballots in this past national election, that the results there, it's called a blue shift. Have you ever heard that phrase in political news? The blue shift. When there's absentee ballots, I guess in many places tend to go more Democratic, and so early results in an election with a heavy absentee presence can initially look like they are swinging towards the Republican, but then as absentee ballots get counted, the shift happens, the blue shift.
And of course, as was predicted by many pundits, Donald Trump made an issue of the fact that, well, I was leading and then I wasn't leading.
Yeah.
Which means there was some funny business going on. Well, the funny business was that they were counting votes.
Yeah, the funny business was he didn't bother to check on how the election counting process actually works and has worked for many decades.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the Democrats stole the election by voting.
Those pesky Democrats, they do it every time.
That's a very interesting way to put it. I like that. Well, also, apparently, there's been this rush of books now coming out. People are reporting on the last days of the Trump administration, and I should look up exactly which book so that I can give the people their proper credit.
I will mention I saw
but,
Philip Rucker talking about his book today, and he had actually interviewed Trump, and they were playing some excerpts from the interview, which were disturbing.
Well, apparently, there were so many stories about Rudy Giuliani. Where's the one I'm looking for? Apparently, on the night of the election, he basically advised Trump's chief of staff to simply say that they won, even though many results hadn't officially been called yet.
That's pretty much been their position all along. I mean, Trump couldn't possibly have lost the election because he's so popular. I mean, he's had an almost 40% approval rating for a very long time.
Well, Texas, you're all in the headlines, unfortunately, lately. What's going on with what's the latest from your state legislature?
Well, they're pretty...
they're on the road.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
the Democrats are not around down there. They have taken a vacation. But the Republicans in this state are trying to push some legislation that is, I guess, arguably voter suppression. In every case where these kinds of laws are being passed, the Republicans try to make the case that we're just trying to make sure there's no fraud. Because, of course, obviously there was a lot of fraud in the last election because the Republican didn't win. So, really, what they're kind of saying is we're trying to make sure that the Republicans win, because if the Republicans lose, that means the election was not right. There was a problem with it.
Yeah, the easiest way to get them to change the subject when they were talking about the fraud is when people ask them to show the numbers, show the proof of the fraud that's occurred in all these elections, and they generally go, well, let's talk about this." Because there's been very little, massive, well, there's been no massive fraud. There's been scattered incidents, and many of them were by Republicans.
There has been some misleading coverage of what the Republicans are doing down there, specifically in their legislation that was triggered by, the critical race theory, the potential that it would be taught to kids. And of course, they're trying to legislate to prevent that from happening because they think that critical race theory makes the country look bad. But there was a kind of a foo-for-all this week where people were saying that, they're passing a law that will say that you can no longer teach that the Ku Klux Klan is immoral. And that actually was inaccurate. That was really not what that law was about. The law was more about shifting where the curriculum is defined and not so much about changing the curriculum. There's a thing called TEKS in our state where they specify all the things that are taught in curricula. And some of that stuff was being added to legislation, and they were removing it from the legislation because it belonged in the TEKS instead. And there were some people on the left that mischaracterized what they were doing there. So that was one thing where the Republicans weren't really doing, what they were doing was not quite as bad as people were saying. But on the other hand, the voter suppression thing is clearly something that we need to be concerned about because we're already a heavily gerrymandered state. And that kind of ensures that they're able to take the election for the House, certainly.
I think you also just are getting a new seat as a result of the census, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's going to be a while before they get around to the redistricting because of all the other stuff they're involved with, all the special sessions, but they're going to have to deal with that, even though they deny that the census is correct in some areas. They are fine with it when it adds another seat because you know who was going to get that seat. But the big thing that is kind of scary is they really want to free up the poor oppressed poll watchers and just give them back basically a free run of the polling places. And they already had a lot of that going on in Texas. I used to go to vote in West Texas long ago, and there'd be people out there watching the polls, and if you were the wrong color, they'd be chasing you off. And they didn't really see anything wrong with that in those days.
Well, I mean, so what's the sense of it? I realize probably like one is a little bit in one's bubble, but I mean, like watching this from way over here in New York, I just wonder, like, are people in Texas just gonna like kind of stand for this, or is there something that if the legislature manages to put this law through, I mean, what do you think people will do?
Well, the left will be incensed, but the red base here in Texas is way larger, so it's just going to get implemented with maybe some deletions. They've negotiated a few of the really bad ideas that they came up with, negotiated some of those away, but Basically, it's still a red state. There was a lot of talk. It's going purple now. It's still red meat here.
Well, some
Yeah.
of the bad ideas are actually gone from the current legislation they're proposing. I can't remember what it was. There was something in there that was
Oh,
politically
overturn the election.
overturn the election. Yeah, that they could be allowed to overturn the election. Well, nobody would. They couldn't get anybody to admit that they had put that in there. So it was really not clear where that even came from. But they've
Mm,
dropped that, and I can tell you kind of what they've got now. They've got a ban on drive-through voting, which was a COVID thing. So it's arguable whether that's a big problem. We didn't have it before, That was something that had been added for COVID. They have regulations about when you can vote, and they have a ban on 24-hour voting, which, I mean, these things about changing when people can vote, changing early voting hours, changing 24-hour voting, that makes it harder for a lot of people to vote. There's a ban on the distribution of mail in ballot applications. I don't think I mean, it's not like they're banning mail in ballots, but they're making it hard for people to send unsolicited ballots
mm,
to people. So if you're like, I don't know, if you're like a party or a campaign and part of your strategy is to find your people and make sure they get a ballot that they can mail in
mm,
and thereby like kind of boost the vote. Um, you can't do that anymore if this thing passes.
mm, mm.
There's new ID requirements for people who vote by mail. I'm not exactly sure I know how egregious those are. I mean, you have to provide a driver's license number or the last four digits of your social security number or something like that. For the votes to be counted, they're going to have the right information and they have to have matching information on the envelopes. It makes it a little more complicated and you have to provide a little bit more information. I don't think that is necessarily going to keep people from voting, but you know,
Yeah, they also, on the mail-in
very
ballots, they have the signature check, which is a really questionable thing that they do. I've talked to some people who worked in polling places, and they said no, nobody really, does a real serious check unless there's just something that's drastically different about their signature that they have on file. But
Yeah.
that's not really, checking someone's signature against a previous sample is weird anyway, because how many of us actually sign our name the same every time? I know I don't.
I do.
What
Well,
do you?
this is what they do. This is what they historically do in New York at polling
Yeah.
places. So, and we don't have any significant voter fraud problem in New York that I'm aware of. We have other problems. I'm not trying to hold New York's
I don't think
voting
anybody
voting
has a
rights
significant voter fraud problem.
situation. Yeah, no, obviously. But yeah, so all I can say is the signature thing seems to have worked pretty well for New York for a long time. Now it's all going digital, which is pretty cool.
So another thing they're going to do here is this law would have them check the voter rolls monthly to
Mm,
see if there are any non-citizens on there. And in the past they have red flagged people who were actually naturalized citizens. So that's a little bit controversial there.
mm.
Um,
Can you file like an affidavit ballot if you go to your polling place and they don't have you
I'm sure you
registered?
can. I'm sure you
Yeah,
can. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't see anything that would prohibit that from. Yeah, I mean, that's something that.
Yeah, they have the conditional ballots that, if you're not on the rolls and you're supposed to be, they'll let you fill out a conditional ballot that has to be straightened out after the election. But
It's
you
a
know,
lot
they-
of points of friction, though. Yeah.
There's another thing about there's been an issue here. Like they had one guy here who voted and has actually been arrested
Yeah,
because
I've heard
he
it. I wanted to
voted
ask
and
you about that.
he
He
was
waited
still on
7 hours
parole.
online, right?
He was on parole and he wasn't really supposed to vote. So his vote wasn't the legal vote, but he didn't intentionally cast an illegal vote. But I think there's some language in the new law that the Democrats asked for that would require judges to inform somebody if they can't vote because of a conviction they have, and to make it clear to them when they will be able to vote.
Yeah, they arrested and imprisoned a woman from a previous election. I forget how many years she was sentenced to, but it was a sizable prison sentence. And she was in the same position. She was on probation and didn't know, that she couldn't vote. No one told her, so she went ahead and voted like she always had.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also relevant to these situations that, I mean, I'm the man. I'm looking his name up. The guy who was arrested. Let's see. According to NPR, Hervis Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's a Black person, and your Attorney General Ken Paxton is a staunch Republican and a so. Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's hard to look at this and not see a sort of neo Jim Crow thing going on,
Well, you mentioned Paxton. He is a living example of the distraction technique of, he's under indictment for all sorts of things. So anytime someone brings that up, you say, well, let's go investigate those people over there. They're way worse than whatever you're accusing me of. And
Yeah.
he just loves to file suit against anybody that can distract the attention away from his crimes.
Yeah.
So
the woman you were talking about, her name is Crystal Mason.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, Crystal Mason,
Yeah.
Exactly.
She was
And the
arrested,
other-
and she's in prison now, as far as I know.
The other thing is with poll watcher protections, which Scoop mentioned earlier, and they want to give them more ability to move around within polling places. And I think that the Democrats are on board with part of this about like not obstructing their view or making it hard for them to see what's going on. And that doesn't seem unreasonable, but there's been some concern that they will be given so much freedom of movement that they will obstruct.
Yeah, the fear was that they would be roaming around as people are trying to cast their votes and looking around and looking at these people and looking over their shoulder. And that would be a bad thing. I don't know if they would allow that, but that was what a lot of people were worried about is, are they going to be coming up and harassing people as they try to vote?
I'm only laughing here because, John seems to be sipping his wine at a faster rate the longer we talk about this.
There's nothing like politics to make you want to drink.
Well, I couldn't get an IV set up, so I've learned to drink fast. You never know when it's going to be pulled out of your hands.
Oh my.
So
I noticed that neither of you has a glass of wine. What happened?
I've got my mineral water here. Emily, you're in New York City, as we call them down here in Texas. What's up with Rudy? I haven't heard any Rudy lately.
Rudy has had his license to practice law in New York suspended.
Gee, there's a shame.
That's horrible.
This, some complaints were filed about him by other, within sort of the legal community. There's a process whereby lawyers kind of police their own. And I mean, it's an official process. It's not like, the mob or something, but so complaints were filed, investigation requests were made. And recently his license to practice law was suspended in New York due to his actions. The legal cases he was bringing but very bogus, transparently bogus and fraudulent and legal cases he was attempting to bring to try and overturn Biden's win in the election. And, lawyers are not supposed to misuse the law system that way. I mean, part of your duty, you have the privilege of practicing law, and one of your responsibilities is to do it in good faith. So the Rudy was determined not to have done that. And then not long after that, his license to practice in DC but was also suspended, by the way. So both places, those are the two places in the country where he's licensed. So in New York, I know this is typically considered a sort of step along the way to actually being disbarred. I don't know if that process is underway in Giuliani's case, though.
I think I heard somewhere that there is an expectation that eventually they'll go there.
It seems, I mean, what an incredible fall. I mean, the guy was
America's mayor.
Well, before that, he was, oh my gosh, district attorney, right? For the Justice Department. He was a Justice Department prosecutor. And I mean, his time as mayor mostly predates my return to this city. But mostly I moved back in 2000, and obviously he was mayor in 2001. But, I'm a very, sort of loyal to my city where I grew up kind of a person, New York City. And it's almost physically painful for me that this guy was once mayor of my city, and this is where he is now, as a human being.
Well, he started smoking whatever it was Trump was smoking. They were like sharing the bong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and his star was sinking up prior to all of that anyways. I guess he spent too much time at the legendary Four Seasons.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my favorite foul ups of him, booking at the Four Seasons Landscaping.
Oh, right. Yeah. I get what you're saying, though. I mean, I've begun to wonder if this is just something people like us say to ourselves to sort of try to comfort ourselves, that surely people like Giuliani and Trump are in on the scam. You know what I mean? Like, at the very least, it has to be some sort of calculated plan, right? They can't actually really believe the stuff they're saying. But
well,
I mean, it really looks like, if that were true at some point, it sure looks like they've like you said, they've tasted of that magic mushroom, and they're really they seem very earnest about it now.
Steve told us what the strategy is: flood the system with shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what they have persistently been doing.
Yeah.
And I think about that every day, about what he said about that, and when I read all of these things that are going on, they don't have to try to get it right. They just have to create chaos,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the question is, what are they doing underneath all that chaos?
Yeah, in the case of Trump, I think a lot of his problem was he really was dumb in a lot of things, like the way the government works, the way the Constitution works. I've read a lot of comments from people who worked under him, his aides and his staff, and they were just amazed that he did not know, but he still got to do all these things.
Well, yes, it does seem like to be fair, though, he was a lot more right about all of that than than one would have hoped. I mean, the number of guardrails that he was able to smash apart is considerable.
Yeah.
I mean, when I feel as if, like, when I'm sitting back saying, you know, the Pentagon will save us. You know, like, the generals will save us from this corrupt president. Then it really feels like we've gotten to a crisis point in America.
Indeed.
No, you know, just as a phenomenon. I know veterans. I respect the choices that people make to serve in the military, but, you know, it's like a bad move for democracy if, like, we're falling back on the generals and the admirals, you know, being our last line of defense against tyranny.
I was really surprised at, you know, people like Miley coming out and saying that they were trying to avoid, you know, a coup being pulled off by Trump. And back, you know, in the 60s and 70s, I did not see any military people ever being capable of that kind of, you know, stand-up spirit, because I always saw them trying to overthrow Chile and, you know, whoever else was on their shit list. And
Right.
it was refreshing to see somebody doing the right thing.
That's good. That's true. Oh, on the topic of people being held accountable for their actions, you know, in addition to Giuliani's losing his licenses being suspended, you have heard, I think, that Michigan has taken some of the Trump legal team to federal court to get them to make amends for misusing the legal system as well.
Yeah, they got a spanking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just surprised there's not more people, you know, being taken away in handcuffs for perjury, because a lot of the testimony they were giving seemed to me to be perjured.
Yeah, it's mystifying. I don't know, you know, there's definitely, I have a feeling of, like, I would really like to see justice done in a really formal way, but I guess some people argue it would be too destructive to the national fabric if, like, the full scope of Trump, you know, criminal actions undertaken under the Trump administration were actually pursued and prosecuted, investigated by Congress, you know, charges made by the Justice Department. I don't know. But where are we if we don't hold people accountable for these high crimes and misdemeanors?
Well, not everybody's being held accountable.
Find a lawyer.
Eligible to practice in Texas. Congratulations.
Oh, great. There goes the neighborhood.
Well, I mean, she's a Texas lawyer.
Boy, is she ever.
And I don't know that there's been any move to pull her law license here.
Well, the Bar Association here does have a sketchy reputation for not coming down hard on people who misbehave. You know, lawyers who step outside the law and seem to get a tap on the hand, you know, not even a slap on the hand. But there's not a lot of enforcement of any of their so-called, you know, laws, what it takes to be a lawyer legally in Texas. You know, it's kind of depends on who the lawyer is.
Sidney Powell, I think, has a pretty good defense, though. Her defense is that people should take one look at her and know that she can't be believed, you know? And I agree with that. I'm down with that. And I guess Lynn Wood may have been making the same argument. I don't know. Those people were just kind of weird people out there who were doing the Steve Bannon thing, you know? They were flooding the system with shit.
Yeah.
That's what it was all about.
Well, I guess, and that's essentially what, like, the state of Michigan is charging, that, like, their goals were not legal, they were political, and their political goal was to sow mistrust in the election they did that pretty effectively, and they shouldn't be allowed to walk away from
Yeah, exactly.
that. At least in Michigan. At least in federal court in Michigan.
Do you know anybody personally who advocate the QAnon RPG? I think of it as just a role playing game, but
that's a great question, and so far, no one in my circles has admitted to being at all swayed by Q. What about you?
I've talked to people who acted like they might be a little bit interested, but I don't think that they picked it up.
I'm constantly afraid that some family member is just going to somehow drop into a conversation that, some Q thing, and I'm going to be faced with the prospect of trying to deprogram them. But it hasn't happened yet.
Well, Reddit has a subreddit for people who are dealing with QAnon people in their sphere, And there's a lot of stories out there about people who have like some family member who has just completely gone insane over QAnon. But, I've seen people do that over World of Warcraft too. I think any role-playing game can have that effect, or, Dungeons and Dragons. Sometimes people get a little too into it,
I'm waiting for someone to come up with a QAA 12-step program, Q Addicts Anonymous.
So, why do you think it crosses? Why do you think that the Dungeons and Dragons, aficionados are not out marching with, flags with sigils and coats of arms on them, but Q people are marching around with big Q flags? And
well, no, I mean, I was kind of joking earlier. This really is a different context. Q was presented as a real thing and a true thing, but it had the structure of an RPG, and it had it sort of drew people in the way those games can. But at the same time, people were convinced that they were talking about something that was very real. And I cannot explain how anybody could buy any of that bullshit. I mean, the idea that anybody would believe for a minute that Democrats are eating children or something like that, or I don't know, drawing their blood or whatever. It just seems so weird to me. How could people believe that sort of crap?
Well, these are some of these tropes are really cyclic, and what's changed is the obviously is the communications is now there's digital communications, online community that can send this stuff to where maybe it would have gotten around to, let's say, 1,000 people or even 10,000 people. Now it can be, flashed out to tens of millions of people. I mean, I am old enough to remember the satanic panic of the 1980s.
That was very popular down here in Texas.
Which was similar, if you think about it, that in that case, people were accusing school teachers of running satanic cults that were inducting children, right? Or I don't know, were they sacrificing the children or? Well, yeah. So, but it was the children. It was, we must say the just like Q, save the children, so it's like the trope just keeps getting updated for the times.
Yeah, and a lot of this is just recycled anti-Semitic attacks. They used to talk about the Jews are eating the children and hiding them in a basement somewhere. It's like
the blood libel.
Yeah. And the Jewish space laser, that I saw that. It's like, okay, I'm leaving. The race is ended.
Yeah, I mean, whenever people say that kind of thing, as if they actually mean it. Like my next question is, okay, I'm a Jew. Where's my space laser? What did I get left out of the meeting where we could sign up for sessions running the space laser? I mean, it's not fair. It's just not fair.
You had a space laser.
No, I don't have a space laser. I have like a laser pen to play with the cat. That's about as far as it goes.
It's close enough.
Demonizing the other is a favorite pastime in this country. Has been around for a long time. I was raised in the Southern Baptist Church, and there's a real libertarian and liberal thing, and they always would tell us you can't go and hang out with the Catholic kids because they all have guns in their basement at that Catholic church, and if any Protestants show up there, they're never seen again. And they would say this to the kids with a straight face, and a lot of kids bought into it and would not associate with any of the Catholic kids. And I'm like,
You mean that wasn't true?
they were the fun kids. They were the first ones I associated with.
Yeah,
Wow,
the
that's
Episcopalians were like
intense.
Switzerland, you know?
Neutral?
Yeah, neutral.
Huh.
Well, and it's interesting. I was just reading today about how there are some really right wing Catholic organizations that are, you know, practically like the evangelicals in their beliefs. And, they may actually have guns.
A lot of people in America do.
Yeah, there's a lot of guns right now. And
Mm.
there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of potential for violence, which is the thing that I've worried about. I keep thinking, I actually have a bet with a guy. Um, I said that I thought that the kinds of people who made this January 6th thing happen, that they were going to come back around and that at some point there was going to be another incident like that. And he's betting me that it's not going to happen. In fact, he thinks all the people who might do that have already been picked up by the police.
Only that were true.
But I actually think, I think that there's a potential, or, we may not have a civil war, but we could certainly have some really bad and some really difficult stuff happen. And a lot of people might get killed.
Mm.
Yeah, well, out here in the Jade Helm country in Bastrop County, that's where I live, and you can swing a dead Democrat without hitting a crazed Republican with guns and military vehicles. And they're all over the place. So those people did not go away. And a lot of those people that, went to Washington, were from this area. And some have been arrested. But I hear the August, second coming of President Trump is being circulated all the time. He's coming back in August.
Mm. It seems very pathetic to take advantage of people who that way for whatever reason their critical thinking faculties are not acute enough to detect the tomfoolery of all that, and they're all essentially being just, this is like how it looks from the outside vantage point. You're just consistently manipulating a lot of really credulous people for terrible ends. It's horrible.
Well, but it's important to know that Timothy McVeigh was not a solo act.
No.
He was one of many who were like him, and those people are still out there, and they've just been like festering. They're angrier than ever. And while they might not have gone out and blown anything up yet, that doesn't mean that they won't eventually, or that they wouldn't take to the streets with their guns, or that they wouldn't come, I don't know, marauding into neighborhoods and taking people prisoner. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anything's possible. But they think that same thing about us. There's people out there who think that the communist lefties are gonna maraud their neighborhoods and take them prisoner.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the
Somehow
difference.
we've got to declare a truce here.
Here's the difference, though. When was the last time a leftist revolutionary assassinated someone in the United States? Was it? Is it 100 years ago? 70 years ago? There's been no revolutionary left in this country. Certainly not any left that was capable, that committed any extreme political violence of that nature in probably close to a century. And there's been no revolutionary left at all to speak of since the early 1970s, after the FBI, infiltrated and basically hollowed out the movements of the 60s. But there have been, in the intervening decades, the folks you're referring to, John, sorry, my brain's going blank, but basically people from the right side who have committed assassinations, assassinated abortion doctors, targeted employees of abortion clinics for harassment and worse. But Timothy McVeigh blew up a building, the Oklahoma City Federal Building. 168 people or so died in that attack. So, I mean, yes, they think they will say, but the communists are gonna come kill us all. But this sort of very anti-government faction in the United States actually has killed hundreds of people, dozens or hundreds of people, scores of people, let's just say. That's the difference. And when you talk about flooding the zone with bullshit, I mean, this is consistently what seems to happen. Like last year, you had the Attorney General of the United States talking about Antifa being a threat, a looming threat of domestic terrorism. Like, what is Antifa? Does Antifa get together in the woods in the weekend like the Proud Boys and practice their military maneuvers? Wear tactical gear to Washington D.C. to march on the Capitol? No, it's Antifa is like saying, I'm a deep ecologist, right? And it's more a thought affiliation than an organized political movement. But
some people point out that the one time that we had a really organized and deadly Antifa movement was during World War II.
Yes. They turned Antifa into the boogeyman, basically. It's like, let's find something to scare the kids with. Don't go near those weird-looking people. They're Antifa. They're the boogeyman.
Yeah. What's frustrating to me as a reporter is how much the national political press will walk down the garden path again and again when that flag gets waved. I mean, you have, it's very frustrating when again you have this separatist, fundamentalist movement in this country that is actually, stockpiling weapons and has been documented as murdering people, and not in recently, not 100 years ago, but over the past few decades. It's
don't
terrible.
worry.
Oh, go ahead.
Don't worry, because Elon Musk and Bezos are all going to make it better. They're going to shoot us all into space, and all our troubles will be over.
Those guys can go to Mars.
We'll be saved. We'll be saved by the mega billion zillionaires.
Have you reserved your seat yet? Yeah.
No, I'm waiting to get my shot at the space laser first.
Oh, okay.
We're getting low on time, and I realized one thing we could have discussed and we didn't really get to was the role of media in all this, and maybe we should do that.
Sounds like a return appearance.
Yeah, next time.
Yes, please don't ask me to critique the media of which I am a part. I never want to talk about that.
Did you know I've become a co-host of the media conference on the Well?
I didn't. Is our congratulations or condolences in order?
A little of both, I think.
You should join us there. It's
I should.
There's a lot of interesting discussion.
I am still, after all this time, the host of the Science Fiction on Television conference on the
know.
Well. Yeah, yeah. What do you think? The Well is much smaller than its heyday, but it still feels very community
There's quite a
there.
bit of really intelligent conversation happening on the Well,
Yeah.
and it's certainly worthwhile to be there. And we've been plugging it a little bit because it could use an inflow of people, but it's got to be kind of the right kind of people. Not everybody's going to get into that.
Yeah.
Civil
Yeah.
discussion. Oh my God.
More civil than, there's certainly been episodes of very uncivil discussion on the Well, but the key difference is there's always active moderation.
We know that's an interesting thing. We are kind of out of time, but I will say that so that's an online community that's been around for over 35 years, maybe pushing 40 years. And one thing that I can say about it, just having got back and got more active there again, is that it's matured. People there have matured. You don't see quite the same level of flame that you used to see.
Interesting.
But I guess we're out of time. And thank you so much for joining us, Emily.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
And I'll circle back with you. We need to continue this discussion in a few weeks.
Sure.
We'll see you next time.
Great.
Next time, yes.
Have a good evening,
All
folks.
right. Well, thanks. And thanks to everybody who showed up tonight. And I'm looking for, I can't find the place